Welcome back to the workshop on the mission to end violence against women and girls. My name is Maj-Britt Rinaldo Ronnebro. I'm the Secretary General of the International Police Association, and I am also a criminologist working at Linnaeus University in Sweden. I'm the chairperson of this workshop, and I'm very happy to see that we got a good lineup also in part number 2. This workshop started Monday this week, and we had 4 different speakers, including myself. We started a workshop to look at a program in Sweden that is called in English The Way Out. It's a method that is taken from USA to Sweden, and is a treatment program for perpetrators, victims, and witnesses, particularly children, of domestic violence. Any kind of violence against the partner is not accepted, and it's also important that you look after not only the perpetrator to stop the abuse, but also the victim to help them through and understand their rights in the society. When it comes to witnesses like children, they are also those that has been identified the past years to be in need of professional care. We moved on to a speaker, Susan, from the police in Sweden, and she presented a program that is established in Sweden and now will be implemented to the Swedish police, where the police negotiators are working with perpetrators. This is absolutely new to most of the audience that listen on Monday, and her presentation can be seen on the website later as the rest of ours on the London Policing College. Susan made a really interesting presentation, and I'm sure about that this is something that could be implemented in other countries as well, if this kind of method would be identified to be working. We left Sweden and we moved to Norway, and we listened to Kim about her pioneer work in Oslo with the women from that migrated to Norway, but also her interesting work for the UN Women in Ethiopia, where she is training police officers in diversity and how to respect and also work according to equal rights. That it is really, really important when you come to some countries where women are not seen as equal partners always. And the contribution Kim is doing in Ethiopia will now also be presented in Ghana. Our ending session on Monday came from Australia, and Jeanette talked about her research from the Northern Territory of Australia on the First Nation people, where she looked at domestic violence and could identify in her research that was a much, much higher risk with domestic violence in First Nation partnerships. And this was really shocking news to many of us that listened to it. And we can see the challenge for not only the police in the North Territory, but the police on average in Australia, who's working with domestic violence, and also are meeting First Nation people and how to train them. So this will go on into this workshop today, and I'm say just welcome to you wherever you are out in the world. And I would like to hand over to Mrs. Ulrike Neuhoff at IBZ Gimborn, that is the Education Center of International Police Association. And Ulrike, you are our excellent moderator for today, so I hand over the word to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the flowers, Maj-Britt. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be invited to moderate this workshop and be with you to introduce the speakers. Karen already wrote in the chat bar that you are asked to put your questions in the chat bar, but not also put your questions there, which I will hand over to the presenters at the end of their talks. But also, if you came across any best practice examples you would like to share with us, we really kindly ask you to put them there, so we can consider them, and they will be considered in the evaluation of the workshop, and we will just want to collect them and share them with with all the community that is interested in the matter and is working on the issue of decreasing violence against women and girls. On Monday, as Maj-Britt said, we ended our journey through the landscape of initiatives and efforts to reduce violence against women and girls in the Northern Territory of Australia. And we are still on the continent today with two speakers from Queensland. Sarah, you are a senior lecturer in criminology at the University of Queensland. And I understand that one of your research aims is to advance the role of police and police training in improving outcomes for victims, offenders, and the communities. And this is why you will be talking to us today about the transformation of police responses to sexual offenses together with Kirsten Helton. Kirsten has been in policing for 20-odd years with a focus on child protection, child welfare, and you are now in charge of special investigation trainings that you developed together with Sarah, as I understood, and you hold a master in child and adolescent welfare, and you also did the evidence-based policing course at Cambridge University. I think this is where you met Maj-Britt, the two of you at Cambridge University. And you both are interested, and I think this is a very important aspect of your work. You both are very interested in increasing partnerships with external agencies to facilitate meaningful research that sustainably contributes to the quality of policing in this matter. So I'm very interested in listening to you, and the floor is yours. Kirsten, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just need 1 second to do this. And checking this is working. Okay. Have we got confirmation you can see that?
We can.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. I just wanted to clarify, I didn't do my evidence-based policing at Cambridge. I had the pleasure of Professor Larry Sherman. He came to Brisbane, and he provided us with the training here in Brisbane. So that was amazing. So thank you for the introduction. So as you've heard, my name's Kirsten Helton, and my research partner here with me is Sarah Bennett, so from the University of Queensland. Also just wanted to mention our absent research partners, which is Katrina Carr and John Gilmore, who are very integral in all of this as well. So together we want to tell you about our research that we've done that shows the transformation of responses to investigating sexual assault directly resulting from a training we developed. Also wanted to, these are some further acknowledgements. Of course, you know, it takes a village to change things, and definitely it was a village. So particularly those that assisted us with financial support, as well as moral support and expertise, and also those with lived experiences that have definitely showed us the way in how to present this sort of training. So sexual assault is the most intimately violent offence that can occur to a person. Alarmingly, in 2021, there were 30,000 reports of sexual assault across Australia. So breaking this down into the statistics of prevalence across a lifetime for people, that makes 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men having been sexually assaulted. And we also know a few things about those statistics, and that is that they're grossly underreported. In fact, we know that 85% underreported. So that's a horrendous amount. Whilst this in itself we find is an issue, the problem exists for us in policing that when an offence is reported, the attrition rate is poor, it is low. So, the matters aren't continued. And we put this down to victim shame, fear, and most concerningly, mistrust or lack of confidence in the police. So these negative experiences have a secondary trauma on the victim. And this is the notion that became the focus for us to change our training, or to develop our training and the research, and we saw that every reported case was an opportunity for the very best in policing. So in Queensland, there was 3 major inquiries, including a Royal Commission, but it also we had published criticisms of police that came within a very short time, and we were heavily criticised for our responses to victims for these heinous crimes. So we identified some key themes, as you can see there, from the recommendations that we thought we could influence from our training. So importantly, we acknowledged that we did have problems and that we needed to overcome these. And we acknowledged that this is probably not unique to Queensland in itself either. So we wanted to do things better, and we wanted to prove that we could do things better, and hence what we have done. And we have done this by making better outcomes for victims, and it was always about the victims. So as you can see the circle there, we had poor procedural fairness, poor training opportunities. We weren't victim focused, and we lacked understanding of complex trauma, and there was an issue with culture and attitudes around these sorts of offences and the victims. So with the ICQ training, as it's called, so it stands for Investigating Sexual Assault, Corroborating and Understanding Relationship Evidence. We developed that in 2016, and we simultaneously partnered with UQ, which was one of the best things we've ever done. It's been a highlight of my career, I must say. So there's 6 core components that we based our training on. The first one was research, and we did it with contemporary theories around trauma. We did it with precedents around other jurisdictions, and we partnered with experts in relation to that. We look at the police role in progressing sexual offence investigations and how we treat our victims. We looked at survivors themselves and the trauma that they suffer, and that the victims, so they're making sure that we're a victim-centric approach. We also understanding the whole story, which is a real key component to the training, and that's understanding all the story that goes with it, how things came about, and how the offender got the victim to do certain things. We then look at the offender, which is important, as you would have heard May-Britt, understand why offenders are offending. So we're trying to understand their offending behaviours and typologies and their victimology. We looked at the justice side of things and how we can gather the best evidence from a victim and within the boundaries of legislation to ensure principles of procedural fairness are adhered to. And lastly, and certainly not most least, is our police wellbeing, to ensure that our officers are being acknowledged for the difficulty in these types of offences are to investigate. We often suffer secondary trauma from these sorts of things. So we wanted to acknowledge that, yes, it is difficult, and we wanted to make sure that they are the best version of themselves, for themselves as well as for the victims. So this is our happy foursome, Sarah, myself, and Katrina and John. We were receiving an award for our training. Simultaneously developing this training along with partnering with UQ to do the research, like I said, and that partnership has never stopped since 2016. And honestly, it was a greatest leap of faith. Police don't like strangers coming in and infiltrating us and us feeling threatened. We often think we know it all, just ask us, things like that. So the relationship was built on trust, and we needed to share data, we needed to share investigative performances, and we needed to open ourselves up to scrutiny. And I'd say from day one, from the day I met Sarah, we knew that she was the one for us, and we knew the person we needed to partner with. So, yes, it's been a great journey. I'll hand over to you now, Sarah.
Thank you for that, and I think I owe you a coffee later, I think, for sure. Listen, it was such a privilege and an honor to be able to partner with police to look at this really important issue and to try to make a change. So we sought to evidence and support the incredible training that they had done with a really good evaluation. So we sought to evidence whether the 2-week training course provided officers with the tools to better engage survivors and offenders in the investigative process. And we did that in 2 ways. First of all, we wanted to know whether the course itself led to greater knowledge and skills to facilitate improved responses to sexual offences, which we assessed through a pre-post course survey. And that was really just a litmus test for the course. You know, did it actually do what it set out to do in terms of changing those perceptions? But importantly, and really critically, our priority was also to test whether training impacted behaviors of investigators in a meaningful and applied way and led to improved outcomes. And that will probably be, that's our focus of the presentation today and our results. But before we get there, sorry, could you go to the next slide first? I think we've just got to keep going. And the next one after that, stop. Please, one before. Thank you. So the first part of our evaluation was that actual survey. So what we were really keen to do there is see those differences pre and post. So we actually wanted to see whether or not there was a difference there in terms of the impact of the course. So we won't go through all the detail of, you know, all the questions that were asked, but just as a brief summary, I just want you to have to come away with the knowledge that there were some remarkable changes that occurred in the course pre and post in terms of knowledge, attitudes, and perceptions. We saw definitely an increase awareness and understanding of the rate of unreported sexual abuse for females and males. Often males are very forgotten in this whole process. The impact of trauma on survivors' memory and event narrative, and that's really where that whole story approach was so critical. Bias in its role in case decision-making, barriers to case progression, and the importance of rapport building with survivors, particularly again, that whole story and that ability to engage throughout the entire investigative process. And finally, of course, well-being and support for survivors and police. So just next slide, please. And I think in terms of impact, a lot is said in these 2 word clouds to a text response that investigators had to the question, what are the barriers to survivors progressing their sexual offense to prosecution? Here, the bigger the word meant that they were more frequently referred to in the text as a barrier. So I actually just want to hand over to you very quickly, Kirsten, just your reflections when I first showed you these word clouds.
Well, it was actually mind-blowing, and I think it was so indicative of what we found from our training, that originally pre-course officers were focusing on the system and on the victim and blaming and the system and the victim for not being able to progress matters. And then post-course, they became, you know, it was a very quick shift within the 2 weeks. It's a 2-week training course, which I forgot to mention. So around fear and trauma and being believed and embarrassment and needing support and their memory. So it really did shift their thinking from, like I said, systematic to trauma-informed and victim-focused, and to the point where we have a reflective journal that they fill out throughout the course. And so officers have actually filled it out going, oh my God, I feel sick to the stomach that I need to go back when I finish this training and reopen some investigations that they may have closed them off prematurely. So that's astounding.
It is. It really is such a powerful, and you can imagine that the way that you are then investigating a case post the course is very different when you look at those those center words: fear, trauma, believed, embarrassment, memory, support, is very different than you would pre-course. And so just perhaps have a think about that as we get to the official results in just a minute. So would you mind just going back to the slide there with that one? Sorry. So what we've what we had is in this evaluation is an opportunity to commence the evaluation with a randomized controlled trial. So because only 20 people could go into the course at a given time, Kirsten and Katrina put out an expression of interest within the QPS to advertise the course, of which, you know, many people then put in an expression of interest. And what we essentially did is we randomly dipped into that pool of people who were interested, and we picked them out to attend courses, sort of one at a time as the courses came through and they were able to deliver them. So every course had about 20 participants each time, so very small. And then I won't go through the entire methodology there, but in essence, over time, we were able to, as the courses progressed, we added those to the pool, and we also had a comparison group where there was equivalency in gender, age, length of service, unit, and sexual offences. You can also see that here, these officers had a lot of experience. So these are not all junior officers. The mean age of the sample was 40 years. The mean length of service was 14 years, so very experienced. So if you could go forward a couple. Great. So just very briefly, I'm now going to just present the official results. And the first comment really is that the officers were incredibly busy in the 4-year period that was in this review and this analysis. So over 72,000 cases, of which over 6,000 were sexual offences, and of those, over 2,500 really at the most serious of sexual offences, rape and attempted rapes. So, you know, incredible amount of workload that these officers are contending with. Next slide, please. And so in terms of the first results, a key outcome is really clearly important in policing is to see those official measures in terms of how are we actually solving, you know, are we solving more cases. So here you can see that what we're comparing is outcomes for solved sexual offences. The purple bar are the investigators who have not taken the course, and the iSecure results are in green. The gold stars in this presentation are mean statistical significance. I'm so sorry, that's my dog in the background. So the first result here shows that in our 4 years of analysis, iSecure investigators solved sexual offence cases at a significantly higher rate. So almost 48% more, or 48% when compared to the control group at 36%. So this difference is 12% higher rate of solves and was found after controlling for all those length of service, unit, gender, caseload, etc. I'm thinking one of my children will come and help with the dog in just a minute, so hoping that'll help. And of course, what we can't measure in this analysis is the impact that these arrests also have on preventing and deterring other offences from occurring. So next slide, please. With a increase in solved, you would expect a corresponding reduced number of cases of unsolved, and that's exactly what we found, again, statistically significant for iSecure. Next slide, please. And whilst we didn't find, this is just all sex offences, just in its whole category, just at the very beginning, whilst we didn't find a significant difference here, you can see it's going in the right direction, but we'll come back to this in just a minute because we had some when we looked at specific offence groups. Next slide, please. What we also wanted to make sure was, were we seeing those gains just in the broad category of all sex offences, or could we make some significant gains with the most severe offence types? And that's exactly what we found. So in relation to rape and attempted rape and other sexual offences, you can see that each are getting really tremendous gains as a direct result of the training. Remember that we're talking about training too. So the fact that officers have taken part of this training and have walked away with additional skills that they are applying. So just next slide, please. So I think for this is probably, I think, one of the biggest gains that Kirsten and Katrina were hoping for. What they wanted to see was that increased engagement was reducing the number of withdrawals, particularly in the most severe offence type. So what we can see here is a 30% to 31% difference in the percentage of cases here for gains in terms of reduction in withdrawal. So that's a huge achievement for these cases. Again, a direct result of the training that the team have done. So really the gold star goes to them and the investigators. Next slide, please. Over to you, Kirsten.
So this is this slide depicts the referrals, and when we talk about referrals, we talk about for victims to services for ongoing support. So this shows that officers with 11 to 20 years and 21 years and above have had the most significant changes in their referral services. So to me, that is a pleasing result, because it's often the officers with more service are doing the more serious offences. So it means those victims that are severely impacted by sexual assaults are getting the ongoing support they need. Anything else from you on that one, Sarah?
No, that's perfect.
Thank you.
And I guess one of the things that the team really wanted to know is whether the training would have a shelf life. So when we think of training normally, we would expect, in fact, this is what we were expecting, is that the training would essentially have some gains at the beginning, but then over time it would kind of fizzle back to the default, the original behavior. What you can see in this one is the control group in purple, pretty much over the 4-year period, very much had similar percentage of cases solved. Whereas in fact with the iSecure, it was almost as though as they started to apply those new skills and strategies when they were engaging with survivors, conducting interviews and working on that relationship evidence, it was actually increasing. There was an incremental increase. And if you go to the next slide, it's even more pronounced when we look at rape and attempted rape. So here we can see that really the investment in training in relation to investigating rape and attempted rape and all sex offences actually had some long-term gains. So next slide, please.
So this one, as I said in the beginning, we looked at ensured about officer wellbeing, and we wanted to ensure that they are the best versions of themselves, not only for their own wellbeing but also for the victim. So we wanted to acknowledge that there is a difficulty around investigating these offences, and some, particularly with children, can be traumatic. So we looked at their sick leave and their rec leave, and it may seem counterintuitive that we think this is a positive outcome, but often, you know, not acknowledging these sorts of things means a loss to our service, that, you know, officers may leave because of the trauma that they have suffered themselves. So on average, 4 more rec leave days and 2 more sick leave days were taken by those officers that had completed the training. So we see that as a positive, in fact. Now we continued the research with some interviews, follow-up interviews from officers, and we did it around, I don't know, it was probably about the 6-month post and thereon mark. So they had the opportunity to reflect and take those learnings back into their investigations and back into their teams and to the stations. So just a couple of snapshots of obviously the very positive comments that were made by officers, and that, you know, it was a real game changer and how they investigate, and they recognised in themselves how they were judging the victims. And the second comment there is around the whole story approach, which is a really groundbreaking approach that we've been teaching, and it actually led them to locating some further evidence, and so then they were able to link the suspect to that evidence and solve the crime. So that's yeah, very positive for us.
So in terms of just an overview of the results, we absolutely believe that every reported offence is the opportunity to demonstrate the very best in policing. And what was really important is that in terms of this project is that we're able to demonstrate that training is a critical contributor to effective policing responses. It also establishes that evidence-based investigations training, so that big long list that Kirsten showed at the beginning in the acknowledgements, there was a tremendous amount of input that Katrina and the team really sought to inform every part of the training that was conducted. And it absolutely changed knowledge and skills of trauma approach, interviewing and support, obviously in ways that we could demonstrate in terms of the investigative process and subsequent solves, withdrawals, etc. So it significantly impacted investigative practice in very demonstrable ways. It also establishes methodology for measuring the impact of training on practice. So we need to move beyond just delivering training and sitting back and just, assuming that training is having an impact. We actually need to measure that, and that's something that we can do. What's next for us, and I suppose some considerations for you as well as we round up. Our study explored training impact tracking individual investigators. What we're working on now is understanding actually how the team dynamic, those sort of larger, how people work in teams, and also the larger culture of those teams and how that impacts investigative practice at a unit level and responses. So the question too is, are we putting training resources where they need to go? So there's no point providing a really incredible training resource, someone who's had the training, and always putting them in to a place that's overflowing with that skill and knowledge already, when meanwhile you have literally a dry bucket with just a drop of knowledge and skills going out into practice as well. So we need to think about how we knowledgeably and in an evidence way actually put our resources out there to have the best impact. So we're keen about what does that accumulation or functionality occur in practice to impact unit performance? And what is the tipping point of training and accumulation of training so that we can make huge difference, actually change at a much larger institutional level the response that we give to survivors of sexual offences.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to our presentation today. Please look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was very, very impressive. And I think this is a so important research you have been doing there for police training. And I just wonder, I just have the fantasy to how many fields this can be transferred as well. But I mean, I will come to the question. Margaret would like to know whether it's a common collaboration between researchers and police in Australia.
Do you want me to start? And then, because you've got a lot here.
Yes.
It is definitely, probably in the last decade, we have seen substantial gains. The QPS is conducting so many different projects with researchers. We're fortunate in Queensland, we have 3 fantastic institutions. So we've got University of Queensland, obviously I'm biased there, but we also have Griffith and QUT, again, with a whole range of fantastic policing and criminology scholars. So I think the QPS is really spoilt for choice in terms of being able to advance their practice with the skills around them. So definitely in the last decade, they have tremendous amount of projects. So much so, I'll just quickly say, is that for a period of a couple of years, they invested in visiting police scholars. So they actually put a full-time police scholar into each of the institutions so that they could really stimulate those research partnerships.
Wow.
So from a policing perspective, from my perspective, I think, it adds legitimacy to our training products, particularly. It adds evidence base to lots of our theories that we come up with, and it professionalizes our outcomes as well.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think it's so important. And I mean, what I experience over here in Germany is that police forces still are so reluctant to open their doors to researchers. And I think this can be such a, fruitful collaboration, and we can learn so much from each other. So, no, that's great. Margaret wants to know whether this was a voluntary participation in the training, or whether they were police officers were forced.
Voluntold, as we call it. Initially, it was voluntary. Yes. Okay. So we asked for expressions of interest, and we were overwhelmed with those expressions of interest. And due to the success of this, it's now been opened up. So we had it as a specialist, targeting a certain group of investigators, and now it's been opened up to everyone. So there's a level of voluntoldness to it, but it's still voluntary. It's not compulsory.
All right. So, and then Margaret wants to know about the length of the course, 80 hours. Would it be possible to divide this in part-time training, or should it be, really a 2 weeks course?
Well, we do a bit of compartmentalizing, and the first week does focus on victims and the second week does focus on offenders. But obviously they are combined because we look at the whole story and then how us gaining that corroborative evidence from the victim and how it then relates to us in dealing with the offender.
Right.
And having points of collaboration and things like that from the victim's statement. Yeah. So the flow, we would probably lose the flow a bit.
Yeah, and the group dynamics and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Millie would like to know: was this training repeated for the treatment group over the 4 years?
No. The training wasn't repeated. So when you can see that increase over time, that was all from the group, the individual and how they're applying those skills to their practice. So it wasn't repeated.
Yeah. 3 more questions.
That's what's impressive.
Okay. Milka would like to ask you to elaborate any conflicts in regard to promoting a victim survivor-centered approach, which is centered on their consensual participation, and a justice-sensitive approach, which is focused on ending impunity, including at the cost of the consent of the victim survivor. How were such conflicts identified and addressed in your methodology?
Right. Yeah. So we have... So I guess in a nutshell, it's about our needs compared to victims' needs. Is that the so we obviously it's a fine line between how we educate our officers to ensure that the victims are voluntarily giving their story, as opposed to us also trying to not proceed with the matter. So, that is one of the things about the withdrawal of cases. We were concerned about officers were maybe steering victims to withdraw a case. So the victim-centric approach, we have a victim come and deliver their side of the story. We had lots of research with the victim, so we do acknowledge both sides of that spectrum. We also trying to progress, and I think we're a little bit behind. I think UK do this. Victim statements being recorded and then entered as their evidence in chief. So we have a lot to do with our DPP, which is our public prosecutions. The matters that go to a trial. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question very well, but we have a very delicate footprint around making sure officers are trauma informed and victim centric. So we do understand that. Yes, it's not all our way.
Maybe just a question. Oh yeah, Sarah.
I would just add to that is that one of the things that I know was a real focus of the training too is changing the officers' perceptions about their role in the investigation process. So the idea that it's not just trying to get to this prosecution, that indeed often the opportunity for victims to corroborate their story and that help another case was something that is beneficial as well. So actually to be more responsive, as in the victim is the KPI, you know, that support, those referrals, that engagement. And I think that is one of the reasons too that the officers probably come away feeling more fulfilled in their new role, when it's not about, oh, you know, you didn't get it to prosecution, you know, or you didn't get an arrest. It's actually, you know, I supported that survivor. I got them a referral. I was able to corroborate their case to help another person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just a last question, I think, are there any plans to introduce a leadership element to further raise awareness within the police? I mean, this is always a question. How do you get the leaders to
On board.
on
Yes.
board?
So we offer this training up to the rank of senior sergeants, and there is nothing excluding any other ranks to come. But we have a suite of training products as well around victim-centric trauma-informed approach that I've done another project with UQ with another counterpart to Sarah from the social services faculty. So, and it's an online product where and that is open to officers up to superintendent. So yes, you're correct. Yeah. It is a challenge.
Yeah. I would just also add that really because of Kirsten and Katrina's and, you know, this evaluation, we've been able to take it to the top. So the reason that the fact that you're now overrun with training is a direct result of that senior leadership saying we need to make sure that our officers get this training. And so it has gone right to the top. The commissioner was incredibly supportive. But again, you need the evidence to show that it's the investment that is leading to those results. So again, it goes back to, you know, these partnerships make a huge difference in ensuring that the evidence gets to where it needs to go.
I mean, I can only say thank you very much for this so very, very interesting presentation. And I think many of the participants will come back to you because there are still more questions, and we are going to deal with them. And yeah, I would love to ask you to come over to our institution and deliver a training. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye. So we are moving on now, leaving the Australian continent and moving on to Indonesia, where we welcome Dr. Bahrul Fuad. Dr. Fuad, are you there? Can't see you.
Hello, yeah.
Hello, yes, there you are, great.
Do you hear me?
Good,
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Dr. Fuad is a commissioner of the National Commission on Violence Against Women in Indonesia, which was founded in 1998. And you hold a PhD in sociology, so you are a researcher as well, and a master degree in humanitarianism action, which you got from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And in your role as a commissioner, I learned that you are also fighting female genital mutilation and cutting, which is a practice that is highly prevalent in Indonesia. And yes, we are now very interested in your talk, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. From Indonesia, so this the afternoon, and I'm Bahrul Fuad from Indonesia. And before I explain the situation of the violence against women and girls in Indonesia, so let me introduce the National Commission on Violence Against Women, Republic of Indonesia. So this institution is actually, I think the next slide. Yeah. Komnas Perempuan in Bahasa Indonesia, or National Commission on Violence Against Women, is one of the national human rights institution in Indonesia with the specific mandate to build a conducive environment for the elimination of violence against women and promotion of women rights in women human rights in Indonesia. And we have the legal framework for our work. It's this the Constitution of the Republic of Indonesia, and then the CEDAW and Convention Anti-Torture, or CAT, and other relevant national laws and international human rights instrument. And actually, our accountability is the annual report, and the report submitted to the President of Republic Indonesia, and also we have the annual report for the public. So we in March every years in March, so we publish our we call like annual report of violence against women in Indonesia. It is like more than the it is like the quantitative and qualitative data that we publish for the society. And National Commission Violence Against Women in Indonesia, we have tax. Is promoting public awareness, like education for this in the schools, especially for the education related to the sexual violence, promoting the how girls and women can protect themselves from the violence, and conducting research and review the relevant law and regulation, and also we monitoring fact finding and reporting the violence against women and women human rights in Indonesia, and also we provide input and recommendation to the government in Indonesia, both in the local level and national level. And actually, we have 15 commissioners from various background and expertise, and we have 12 women commissioner and 3 male commissioners. And then the priority of our issue. Next slide, please. Priority our issues and program is related to the women in conflict and disaster. And then next slide, please. Yeah, women detainees, prisoners and prison-like condition. So this the second one is more like the women that living in the jail and also in the rehabilitation centers, especially for the women with a social or mental illness or mental disabilities. And then we also our priority is also the woman worker, as like domestic worker in Indonesia and abroad, and also the priority number 4 is sexual violence. So this is like implementation of the sexual crime law. This is the new law in Indonesia that we advocate how to implement in the in Indonesia. And the second is and the 5 is the institutional strengthening. So we also focus on how the national commissions against women, like or we call Komnas Perempuan, is also have the good management and sustainability capacity in handling the case of violence against women in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Yeah, and Komnas Perempuan have for the key achievement is the knowledge building, and also this is related to the monitoring and fact-finding of the violence against women in various conflict and contexts. And then we also have the public support. This public support is related to the how we encourage the social organization. We have Pundi Perempuan is like philanthropy movement to support services for the women victim of violence against women. And also we have the key achievement in strategic networking, correctional mechanism to discriminations by laws, and then supporting the Aceh response, our women group in Papua. And then we also collaborate with the services provider in Indonesia. And another key achievement is also the policy recommendation. So Komnas Perempuan has providing the recommendation to the government related to the policy and integrated service, and also integrated criminal justice system. And also the last achievement is about the issue of the the law number 12 2022 is about the criminal sexuals in Indonesia. Talking about the data, next slide please. Talking about the data, when we compare the data violence against women or the number violence against women in Indonesia from 2020 to 2021, it is rising significantly. So we can see in 2020 the total number that's reported. Yeah, this is the number is the case reported to the National Commission Violence Against Women. So there are 2026 thousands and 62 cases violence against women in 2020, and then in 2021 there are 338 thousands cases violence against women, and all these cases dominated by the domestic violence against women. And then most of the cases are not success solved in the court. So this some of the cases is like finished with we call families how to say, it's not in the courts. Yeah, it's just unfinished the case. And then next slide please. And you know that the domestic violence against women is dominated by the dominated by the violence against ex-partner, and also violence by the partner, violence the predator, the what is the violence is doing by the partner and the ex-partner. It is very high, the number. And the next slide, please. About the when we talk about the public spheres, because there is the domestic violence, and then there is also the public spheres, the violence. The report or the case, the highest case is the cyber violence against women and girls. The number is 875 cases that reported to the our institution or national violence against women in Indonesia. And what is actually the factors that make this violence happen is this about the lack of the vulnerable factor of the violence against women in Indonesia is mostly causes by the lack of sexual and reproductive health education in our society, because most of the girls in Indonesia and children, mostly in general, children in Indonesia do not receive the sexual education or reproductive health education, especially for the children with disabilities. So the children with disabilities are more vulnerable with this for the violence against women in Indonesia. And the second factors is about the gender inequality and gender construction in Indonesia. You know that in Indonesia still what is the patriarchy society, that male is already always put in the top, and then a woman doing the domestic activities in society. And the second is about, and the third factors is about the emotional and financial dependency the victim or the woman to the man, or yeah. This is about because most of the female in Indonesia or women in Indonesia unemployment and have the low education, so they dependent to the family and also their husband and other family members. And the last factors is about the unfair legal system for the women. In Indonesia, still there is a stigma for the victim of violence, sexual violence victim, in especially for the woman, and what is, and the police especially, they still have the low sensitivity for the victims. Some of them are not sensitive, especially when the victims are women with disabilities. Next slide, please. And what we already achieved in Indonesia, and we already have some policies that can improve. We hope that we can improve our situation, especially to reduce the sexual violence in Indonesia. The first is about the law number 12, 2022 on the sexual violence crime. This covers scope of the sexual violence and other form of sexual violence. And the second is about law number 23, 2004. It is about the elimination of domestic violence. And because this law is still need the big effort to implementation, because we have a challenge with the conservative community in Indonesia regarding the what is the perception of the patriarchy, that a woman and a wife is must obey, must be obey to their husband. So this is the challenge in Indonesia, because most of Indonesian, especially the conservative religions, still have the patriarchy perspective in their family. And the last is law number 35 2014, amending law on child protection number 23 year 2002 on elimination of child labor, protection of children and young person, including how to protect them from the sexual violence. So this is, I think, what our work in Indonesia. So we welcome for the discussion and question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving this talk and showing us so much about the situation in Indonesia and the fight you are fighting to improve the situation of women, girls, and children. I have a few questions from the chat, and Margaret would like to know how women in prison do respond to the training you offer to them.
Hello.
Hello?
This question. Yeah.
The question was how the women in prison respond to the training.
Yeah, actually, the response for the training is the police department, actually, yeah, and also the Minister of the Human Rights and Law in Indonesia, and Komnas Perempuan, or the National Violence Against Women in Indonesia, is collaborates with this ministry and especially police department how to educate to educate the officers in the jail officer how to handle, how to take care of the women in jail and the rehabilitation centers.
Yeah. Thank you. And there is another question, the rise in numbers you were talking about, which was really this increase in numbers of violence against women. Do you think between 20 and 21, do you think this was due to the pandemic?
Yes, exactly. This is because of the pandemic. You know that government of Indonesia implement like working from home and then study from home. So according to our survey, this increase the burden of the woman or wife in the domestic activities like cooking, and then prepare for the study for the children, and also the emotional that influenced by emotional, because this like a relation between the wife and then husband and also children in 24 hours in house, this increase the psychological conflict. For the this is effect of the pandemic. So that's our survey. Exactly.
This is very similar to what we experienced all around the world, where families, partnerships had to face lockdowns, and it was it was mainly female partner who was suffering, but I'm sure there are also some male partners who had to suffer violence in this domestic area. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your interest.
Welcome. Yeah.
We are remaining in Indonesia and looking at problems from another perspective, and we are welcoming now Lance Look. Are you with us, Lance?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Great, hello. You are the director of the Operation Underground Railway in Indonesia, an organization that's rescuing children from sex trafficking and exploitation. You served over 30 years in the US government as a criminal investigator and supervisor, and your field of expertise covers the fight against human trafficking, child exploitation, and you also fought the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, as I learned. So you are another one who is fighting for a better world. And you do it now by running this organization in Indonesia. And we are very interested in listening to you. The floor is yours, Lance.
All right, thanks. We're, let's see here. Getting the presentation up. Thank you again for welcoming me. And in a second, we should have my presentation up. But yes, I currently live and work in Jakarta, Indonesia. And I'm hoping, can everybody see?
We can see your presentation, Lance.
Perfect. So I'll talk briefly about human trafficking and domestic violence as my organization is seeing it in Southeast Asia. I'll go briefly through a number of countries and again talk about domestic violence and the relation to human trafficking. And I'll start off talking about NGOs in this space and kind of what my organization is doing and why it's a little different. All right, so again, this is who I am, and Operation Underground Railroad is actually an NGO that was started in the United States. We're actually a subchapter of that, a domestically registered yayasan in Bahasa Indonesian. And so we have a lineage and a linkage, but we're not technically it. So this is again who I am, and I'll get into it as to who we actually are. And honestly, it's very simple because our organization, our parent organization, they all exist for just one reason, and that is to rescue victims of trafficking. We focus on children, but obviously we will work and fight for all victims. And so one of the things that makes us a lot maybe different or just unusual, and again, a lot of you that are police officers or criminal investigators, governmental officials know this. We're an NGO that tries to help and work within the system with law enforcement, with the government ministries to make a difference. And so I know sadly, and then again, I did 31 years in the government service. I tried to, partner a lot of times with these organizations. And sometimes, there was agendas, there was just other issues that kind of precluded that. But our forte, our kind of goal and mission set is to work again with those governmental institutions, the police, the immigration, all those that are out there on the front line. Why do we do that? Because obviously, working within the system, working with them, puts us and our resources in the right place, hopefully at the right time. We also are kind of full service, and so we also try to work not just again with the call it the governmental side, but also with the victims themselves, and then to work and try and break the cycle, as we say. So that is our NGO. Where we're at, we're a pretty large organization. I think at last count, we're about 21 offices, kind of throughout the world. Our presence in Southeast Asia is there in front of you. Our office in Malaysia and Cambodia we're just working that up actually right now. They're both in the process of being established and registered. We're officially registered in Indonesia, and kind of our hub and our old office, if you want to call it, been around now, I believe it's 6 years, is based out of Bangkok, where I'm actually at today doing some training and consultations with the folks here. So another thing that makes us kind of unique is we don't see the way we do business is as a one-size-fits-all. Every country, honestly, every case can be unique. And so we've devised kind of a way to deal with this by looking at things in three ways. We have a operations side, which looks at things in the way of our direct support to law enforcement and again, the ministries, the governmental organizations. And in that, our operations folks provide training. They provide maybe equipment, maybe software licenses, to help with different cases, like with downloading cell phones or working on computers or other devices to extract data. And also, we also do mentorship, and again, we work with the police and the other law enforcement organizations to try and catch the bad guys in however they see we can help them. We're not for profit, so obviously we're not asking for fees. We're not asking them to pay for training or anything like that. We don't also request donations in the countries that we work in. So it's all kind of free of charge if you want to look at it that way. But from the host nation's perspective, it is. The other thing is aftercare. Our aftercare is tailored again to the location and the situation. And the first thing that we always do, and again it starts with each case, is look at what the real issue is. In other words, what's the real need? A lot of places we don't need to try and reinvent the wheel and build shelters or try and supplement or not supplement, but subrogate what's already there. We're very collaborative, very partnership and oriented toward again trying to make things better as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel. And so we provide all sorts of support and services and aftercare specialties, whether it's physical, because obviously a lot of times the survivors are in need of immediate attention, and again we pay for that. Whether it's psychological services, whether it's repatriation, it's a long laundry list of things. And we look at these survivors that we work with, that kind of spawn from these cases we work with the police and the other law enforcement officials from, as a long-term investment. We've had survivors that we've worked with and put through schools. We've done job training and retraining, started like microloans and such for developing business. So we look at it from a very long, a long perspective. And the last thing we do is outreach. And when I say outreach, I mean we have some of our folks that are out there looking for the next case. They're out there looking, again, in, let's say, the red light districts, like here in Bangkok or in some of these other countries of work, and the places where, it appears the bad things are happening, to kind of keep their eyes open. Obviously, the police are trying to do the same thing, but, it's resource intensive for them to do that. And a lot of times, we see things quicker just because nobody's really watching us. And so everyone's always watching, obviously, a police officer as they patrol their beat. So there's a lot of advantages to being, civilian, so to speak. So that in a nutshell is kind of us and what we do, and we kind of replicate that model, again, through 21 countries and growing. And again, we hope to partner with, other police organizations, other governmental organizations, and other NGOs, and like service organizations to again fight the fight. I'm going to switch gears and talk about what I see as kind of this connection between domestic violence and trafficking. And it all came about because it probably was there in the back of my mind, but just not kind of at the forefront where I was thinking about it and talking about it. But I was reading the 2021 Trafficking in Persons report put out by the United States State Department. And they had a section in there talking about familiar trafficking. And they kicked out a stat, which I want to show you, kind of shocked me, because when you look at this, it clearly shows, and I use the term domestic violence because I think trafficking, again, whether it's assault, whether it's, at the worst, murder or rape, I mean, all of this violence all stems from these family units breaking down. And so a crime that you can't even imagine, in other words, parents trafficking their kids into the brothels, or again, trafficking their kids into forced labor in unsafe factories, or out, in the fields picking palm, where it's just dangerous as all get out, and they're not being educated, so they kind of miss out. I mean, that's brutality, and again, violence from the domestic unit that just is staggering. And so I make the correlation and I make the connection that obviously the things that the police and the social service providers, and again the other NGOs that are working in this sector are providing to the family units, honestly, could very well, in the idea of trying to combat domestic violence, are really honestly, and especially in the cases when you look at the children numbers, are directly, fighting trafficking also. So, again, I see, a lot of times, even though I was, with the police and working a lot of these kind of issues, I oftentimes see things in such a new light, again, as I'm learning and reading and again, talking with my colleagues, because what is going on and what is being worked by those officers, by those social services out there on our streets and in our communities may very well be affecting, again, this trafficking, issue that, is just such a problem. So, I think more, kind of maybe broadly in things, I think these days, and it's just, it's something I didn't quite realize, and I wasn't thinking of it this way. But again, I think there's a direct relation, because if the family unit's broken down, then again, what happens to those kids? And again, what happens to usually the female partner? I mean, their susceptibility to be trafficked just goes right through the ceiling. So again, don't have tons of time to talk into this in super depth, but something I don't know if people are thinking about, and kind of seeing that there is some correlation with some data out there and some studies out there. So let's shift gears again, and let's talk about the area. Let's talk about Indonesia and the rest. And again, the doctor and we've met a few times, and hope to have some great collaboration as time goes by. Talked about Indonesia in general with some stats and some information. I'll talk, again, very briefly through a number of countries, and I'm going to use the Trafficking in Persons report to kind of give us a framework and a structure to go through, and talk about where all these countries sit in what we call the tier system. And so the tier system is basically three numbers and a four, which is a subset, that rank these countries on their efforts in trafficking, so their efforts against trafficking in persons. And so one is the best, and means that they meet all the criteria. And there's a whole number, I think it's 15 criteria of best practices. And that's kind of the gold standard if you're a tier 1 country. I think there's about 25 or so tier 1 countries. And then you have tier 2, which means they don't meet all the standards, but they're working toward meeting all those standards. That's usually that they've, doing most of them. And again, there's shortfalls, but they're making progress. Tier 2 watch list, which is the third, means that while they don't meet all the standards, it appears they're kind of sliding. In other words, they're not making any gains. And then you have tier 3, which means again, they're not meeting all those standards, and they're not making any gains, or they're just not significant enough to take them, up. And so Indonesia, and again, I'm starting to learn. I've been here now 3 months, and basically established the organization, and now we're starting to kind of understand what's going on, and talking with all the different players and establishing partnerships. We have Indonesia at kind of, you know, the tipping point. They're what is called Tier 2 watch list. And so it's honestly a huge opportunity for us to do a lot of work and to maybe focus, you know, along with the Indonesian government to try and do the things that, you know, again, will make the differences for the victims. And that's the focus. There's a number of recommendations and things that we'll put together as training priorities to try and help out on the law enforcement side, and again, you know, trying to attack the shortcomings there. But you know, this is where Indonesia is as we speak, and again, we're hoping to move the needle to, you know, at least Tier 2 and up. So let's talk about another country, Thailand. So a lot of people think about Thailand as, yeah, that is a country where you see a lot of trafficking. You know, it's always in the news about brothels and soy cowboy. I mean, all these places and what have you. What's interesting is my relationship here. I've been here a lot doing work, you know, both with the government and outside the government here now as an NGO and all. And it's interesting, even with the amount of activity, you know, and problems. What I've seen, and I think it's well reflected in their ranking, they're a Tier 2, and they were just recently upgraded. And again, I've seen it in a lot of the officers that I've worked with. And then I'll talk about a case that I worked with when I was here early in the year. I was here for about 3 months doing some training with the Thai OUR team. And I would like to say, I mean, there's a certain maturity here that's very refreshing. Again, I've been through Southeast Asia before COVID, even during COVID as a government official, and now back after I retired and working in the area. And again, I've seen it now, you know, kind of year after year, a certain amount of maturity, a definite, you know, kind of pride in trying to take this fight on and really get things done. So I see hope here, which is great, in a place where it's really a rough, you know, kind of a rough area. I don't think anybody can deny there's a lot of bad actors here doing bad things, and so it's nice to see. Now Malaysia, and again, a lot of people don't think about Malaysia in you know, whether it's forced labor or sex trafficking, but I spent 2.5 years in Malaysia as my last tour as the Homeland Security Investigations Attaché. And it's surprising, again, what was going on as we, you know, kind of dug deep and tried to figure out where we could play a part. As an NGO, we're kind of right back in the trenches trying to do that. Our team is trying to establish itself there and make the connections and get the partnerships going. But you'd be surprised. Malaysia is Tier 3, and there's a number of reasons for that. And I think one of them is there just seems to be a certain amount of, you know, call it stubbornness. And again, take this as my opinion, having lived and worked and you know, operated in these areas. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of things, you know, in a lot of countries that could change or needs to change. And, you know, there's maybe personalities involved, politics involved, and what have you. The one thing, again, my organization is not religious, not political. We're just looking at getting things done. And so what we're hoping is that we can, you know, maybe be that bridge or at least help to start that, of just looking for results, just looking, you know, again, to get the job done, to put the bad guys away, and you know, again, rescue the victims, help the survivors. And so, you know, some of the issues are issues that a lot of countries are facing, having issues with seeing what trafficking is versus smuggling. You know, if it's people smuggling, migrant smuggling, or migrant movement versus trafficking, and also having a robust victim identification program, because too often the countries just deport people, and it's horrible. You know, it's sad because they are victims, and they need to be treated as such. again, there's this huge amounts of conversations we can have about, let's say that prostitute or that prostitute you think is just out there trying to, do her thing. Honestly, it didn't start that way. No one wants to be a prostitute. No one wants to be a sex worker. No one wants to, be forced to work in some of the, horrendous conditions we see in forced labor. And so, you gotta figure that out. You gotta understand how to separate and identify. And so, those are the kind of, some of the training that we do and our aftercare does in trying to educate police forces and even, the other folks that are involved as survivors are found and cared for, because a lot of times there's a stigma. So what we're hoping is, again, to see some change and hopefully some movement on the needle back up the tier ladder. So let's go to the last country, and we'll talk about Cambodia, one of the smaller countries in Southeast Asia. And again, one I've had a lot of history with. I've been there many times and worked both government and NGO capacities, and there's a big need there. Well known in kind of the circles that a lot of pedophiles, a lot of sex, we call them sex tourists, like to go to Cambodia. And sadly, I'll let you know that they were just downgraded to Tier 3 this year. And again, one of the big issues we found, and it's never been easy to talk about, and it never is easy, is corruption. There's really issues with corruption kind of up and down. And again, there's politics involved in that with the different governments. But, I found at the working level, a lot could happen, but there were other issues. And again, there's other things that are driving this. Just think about mass construction and mass development of, like casinos and things like that. There's a lot going on in Cambodia that's causing a lot of issues. Again, sometimes with the social fabrics of these communities, and just, kind of overwhelming the system. So we're hoping to see, some work there and making things better and hopefully, kind of starting to fight to change things, and we'll see. I want to talk to you about one case before I let everyone go. And it's a recent case just early this year, and you can look it up. It's called Bar 789, and you can probably just look up Bangkok Bar 789 and get an idea of that. And this is a great example of the NGO working with law enforcement. And in a nutshell, our outreach team, we're out looking and again trying to keep their eyes open, just get an idea what's going on in the communities where we know, the red light districts or what have you. And they noticed in this bar what they thought were minors. And so they came back and they talked. They talked with our operations side and said, look, we have what appears to be an issue. You want to go out and check it out? So we sent teams out and took a look. And one of the things, it was a challenge for the Thais themselves, because we also were obviously talking with the police and getting them on board. And so it was decided to kind of send Westerners. There's a few of us that were present to kind of keep this going. And so we were able to ascertain just through simple chat and talking and all that we had minors. At the time we didn't know their ages, but it looked like 4 working at this little bar in this red light complex of about 40 bars. And so we coordinated with the police and asked again, what more do you need us to do? And they said, well, we'd really like you to kind of keep an eye on them as we plan this operation and set a date for it. And that's what we did. And so again, we were kind of able to vector in the police and let them know that at the time when they decided to do this, there was 3 of the females there, and that again the appropriate players, the owner and the bar maid that appeared to be kind of running this activity were all there. And so the police came in, they made their arrests, and come to find out the actual ages were 14 to 15-year-olds, and that other one was 16-year-old. She wasn't there at the time, but they were able to go get her because she didn't show up for work that day, but she was at where the girls were staying. And so that's one of many examples where, again, working with the system, working with law enforcement, we're able to, again, do a small part to help, and in this case, help rescue these 4 girls. And the other great thing is our aftercare teams then started working with them and basically, started the process, hopefully, of healing, getting them attention, psychological counseling, getting them back to their villages. I know 3 of the girls are back now with their families and hopefully have good prospects for the future. So, there's some bright stories and some good successes also out there. Well, I think that is all I have to present at this time. Do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Lance, for that. I'm so biased. I mean, it's so sad what you have been talking about, but on the other hand, I just can see how you're fighting to make a difference and how you sometimes, with the support of others, obviously succeed. Margaret would like to know whether there is a legislation problem or whether the mindset of the people who are set to protect the citizens are the ones who are causing the bad situation.
It all depends. I mean, in some of the countries that I've worked in and we work in, yeah, it's legislation that's either not in touch or out of date, or again, we've also helped in some countries actually draft legislation. We have some lawyers that are on our staff back in the United States that's all they do. They look at trying to update, trying to, again, help these countries. And so hopefully we could help in that respect, with policy, call it policy issues, because that's so important. The police and the social services can't do their job if they don't have that legislative, foundation to do what needs to be done.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about this in terms of time, how long do you think would it take to change the situation as such in these countries?
Oh, it's a lifetime, sadly, just because the problem is so endemic. I mean, I'll use my country, the United States, as an example. It'll never end. And when I say that, I mean, like, the fight will never end until, honestly, we as humans turn to be better than probably we are today. But I think we can see marked improvement, marked change, just like with some of the other speakers, with the application of, again, good training, good policy, good procedure, again, that desire to really get involved and help. So, it would be almost, despair if we just said, are we ever going to finish this, fight? Probably not. But we all like to think, I mean, we're going to make a difference. And so that's all you can do, is make a difference. Yeah,
I think that's what you are doing. And thank you very, very much for this very, very interesting talk, and a lot of success for the incredible work you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going to welcome our last speakers, Tatiana and Regina. I hope, Karen, you got my message and you can put on Regina as a presenter so that Tatiana and Regina can work together in the last talk. Some words about Tatiana Kotyarenko. She's the advisor on the anti-trafficking issues at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And she's a frontline activist, actually, who has taken part in numerous responses to humanitarian crisis. I know that she rescued girls from a brothel in Africa, in an African country, and one of her latest actions was in Afghanistan. And I think she has been working at the Polish-Ukrainian border to rescue those who are, well, vulnerable and in danger to become a victim of human trafficking, sexual exploitation. Tatiana, thank you very much for being with us. I can't see Regina. Karen has to do it. Karen?
No, Francis has done it. Regina should be able to show a screen.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much hi, Regina. Thank you very much, two of you, for being with us. And I'll hand over to you. And we are very much looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you so much, Ulrike, and thank you so much for inviting both of us to be here today. I'll run through a quick presentation, actually, specifically focusing on gender dynamics behind human trafficking. So once again, I work at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe as the advisor on anti-trafficking issues. The OSCE is composed of 57 governments, including UK, and I advise 57 governments on how to take stronger measures to combat human trafficking, especially from the human dimension side, so looking at the rights of victims and survivors of trafficking. So just to start with, there are really strong dimensions to human trafficking in terms of gender and types of human trafficking. So 50% of all cases of human trafficking identified are for sexual exploitation. Majority of victims of trafficking are women and girls, with a smaller percentage of boys. So what we see is that women and children primarily are targeted by traffickers, although more men who are trafficked for labor exploitation are being identified. We also see the financial breakdown when it comes to trafficking, where 2/3 of all profits made, 99 billion a year, are made from sex trafficking. So they're made from exploitation of women and children. So we have recently launched, and I'll provide a link, the update of the National Referral Mechanism Handbook, and the National Referral Mechanism has been adopted by many countries around the globe, including the UK. So what we did actually in the process, we did assessments of a number of different countries, including UK, as well as surveyed victims and survivors of trafficking to see what they thought the issues were. We got responses from 56 countries, actually, out of the 57 in the OSCE, so outside of the Holy See. And a large proportion of responses actually came out of UK, US, Germany, Belarus, and France. So when it comes to identification of victims of trafficking, as we know it, approximately 1% of victims of trafficking are ever identified. And when we ask them, how have you been identified, or what is the process? Most survivors of trafficking that's self-identification. So unless they walk into a police station and say, I'm a victim of trafficking, they're not likely to be identified. Other ways of identification have been reports to NGOs, reports on crimes to the police. A few have been proactive investigations through coordination with NGOs, as we have heard the previous speaker actually talk about, and proactive investigations using local informants. In addition, as we know it, a large proportion of victims of trafficking are women and girls, but only 34% of respondents stated that their governments have policies addressing gender dimensions of human trafficking, and that actually exacerbates the identification of victims of trafficking and provision of tailored responses and support systems for victims of trafficking, many of whom are women and girls. As the COVID pandemic started, we started looking at this issue. How is it impacting women and girls? And we did, or victims of trafficking generally, but with a specific focus on women and girls. And we actually collected empirical evidence together with UN Women and created a report on addressing emerging human trafficking trends and consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the things that we have seen actually from, once again, surveying survivors of trafficking is that there has been an increased vulnerability to recruitment by traffickers. increased risk of re-victimization of those that have been able to exit their trafficking situation. And many at-risk groups also include victims and survivors of trafficking. And a lot of this has moved online. So a lot of trafficking now is in cyberspace or through cyberspace, whether it's recruitment or exploitation. And children were targeted by traffickers in an unprecedented wave as they were studying, online, as they were conducting all their social interactions online. So that has become a major problem that requires a different approach in terms of identification, investigation, and such. There are a number of different issues actually that also came up in terms of the rights of victims of trafficking and their ability to access those rights, which correlates also to identification, because if victims of trafficking are not provided with the right support and such, they're not going to trust the systems. So there's been less identification because of this. So back to the NRM handbook, and on the cover you will see actually 6 survivor leaders, and the handbook cover to cover is survivor and victim centered, representing actually their voices in terms of how we approach this particular issue. We have worked on this to ensure a trauma-informed approach, and we also created an NRM for children. So that part actually is quite important. And what it is, it's a how-to guide. Whereas before a lot of the approaches were more theoretical, this is really a how-to guide to 4 different pillars. One is identification plus protection, because they have to go hand in hand. Individual support and access to multidisciplinary services, social inclusion, because without social inclusion, victims are more likely to be re-exploited, and criminal justice and redress. So I think you'll find this handbook extremely useful. It's being used by government, it's being used by individual stakeholders. And we've had inputs from top global experts in all areas, starting from senior government officials, law enforcement, border guards, judges, NGO workers, social workers, and survivors of trafficking. And here, we have had, I have some quotes actually from survivors of trafficking from all around the globe, actually talking about their particular situations and how they feel about issues related to their situation and what they can get in terms of services and how they are approached. And I'll give you just a minute to look at this. And one of the things I wanted to actually bring up once again is inclusion of survivors' voices. So about 1.5 years ago, OSCE ODIHR, where I work, launched the International Survivors of Trafficking Advisory Council that has been very active, composed of 21 members from 14 different countries who have been advising governments, providing inputs to policies from the UN General Assembly on, and today we are fortunate to have Regina Lee Jones with us, who is our member from Norway. And she will also talk to you about the situation of female victims of trafficking and their engagement with law enforcement. But one last thing actually I wanted to talk about before handing over to Regina is the perception of who the victim of trafficking is, especially for sexual exploitation. All of us have preconceptions of who would be. For example, the picture on the left, you know, of somebody who is just beaten down, scared, you know, really reserved, etc., feeling bad. But the reality is, we get the picture on the right, somebody who might be aggressive, somebody who will not cooperate. And there are reasons for this, because oftentimes they may not see law enforcement as an entity that can be trusted. A lot of times they're scared. A lot of times they've been taught by traffickers to appear in a particular way, to challenge, harass, behave badly, etc., because that would get them out of the situation, or not admit to the fact that they're being trafficked, because many of them don't even understand what trafficking is. So what appears in front of us is potentially, you know, a woman that has made a choice and enjoying a new lifestyle and making extra money, which is never the case. As the previous speaker has said, there are a variety of circumstances that have created the situation of ongoing exploitation. And there are also the psychology between the breaking time, where a victim of trafficking is broken down, to what we see on the right, a picture of this aggression and acceptance, maybe. We also know that traffickers may punish her family, her children, etc. So she's also under threat, and she's being told to behave a particular way so that she can get out of there. So with that, actually, and we could talk about this more, I would like to hand over to Regina, actually, to provide her point of view, which is the crucial point of view of what is important in terms of identification and interaction between law enforcement and victims of trafficking. So Regina, over to you.
Thank you, Tatiana. Yes, it's a lot of this what you are saying is so right, and it's something I would like to add too. To understand challenges that women meet, we have to understand trauma and all the different phases the trauma can take. Sometimes, for example, I have seen, like in this example that Tatiana showed, a little scared girl, and sometimes like a furious wild animal who has just nothing left to lose anymore. To identify a victim of human trafficking, we are often dependent on the testimony or the story from the one who is abused, and that's why it's an important part of it, but why it is so difficult for victims to open up themselves. One of the reasons is trust. And how I can trust you, for example, to share with you the most private and worst things of my life and know that you will not misuse it. This is the thought I am sitting with when I'm a victim of trafficking. Because it is scary. Firstly, because of the nature of the information and all the shame connected to it. And it is scary because I don't know what you are going to do with this information. But it is also scary because I have just gone through the toughest challenge of my life, where I used all my willpower to learn to survive, adapt, and read the environment around me so I can feel as safe as possible. And now I need to do the same thing again to learn to survive the system. This part is completely new for me at this point. So it is a lot of fear, different kind of fear. And what women often meet is that officials don't understand this fear, and not understanding trauma reactions when fear sets in. One of the other challenges we meet is also not being able to tell you what is happening to us. We don't have words to say about the abuse, and we don't have words to explain why we are so connected to our traffickers. The story you will get will be given in pieces and fractures over several conversations. it will be full of trivializations, making it sound like it's nothing important or shameful. I remember me and two other girls. I was trafficked as a teenager in Estonia, and me and two other girls were once brought to a party with several men. One of us got breakdown in the middle of being with one of these men. She went to the other room and started to act hysterically. The guy got angry and said if she right now do not get back to the bed and finish the job, he will call to our boss and we will get punished. So me and the other girl tried to calm her down, and we convinced her to finish the job, or to be more exact, finish her own abuse and rape, so this man would not call to our boss. We stayed beside her and talked to her to stay strong while she was raped. This was one of the most crazy experiences I had. We basically held each other's hands to survive abuse and rape while this was happening. We were teenagers. The girl I tell you about, she was 14 at this time. When we talked about it later, we simply laughed it off. So I would like to say it once more, or one more time, to make the point clear that when the story you will get, when you hear the story, it will be in pieces and fractures, and it will really take time before it will start to make any sense to you. And this is one of the phases of the trauma. So you have to be a really good listener, and you are the one who can help women find those right words so they can understand what have been happened to them and being able actually to tell you about it. Yes, that was my points for me.
Thank you so much, Regina, and thank you so much for giving others a bit of the understanding of what actually goes on in the background. If I could just make a couple more comments. So Regina just shared with you the reality of what actually happens. And then when you see women in the police station, their abuse oftentimes has been normalized since they were children. So oftentimes their experiences, even from their perspective, are not seen as abuse. And when the police officers look at these women and, then they say, well, they have chosen to do this. And oftentimes even with children, and now the laws have changed in many places, including in the US where I come from, where you have the Safe Harbor Act. But before that, even children were arrested. Once there was an exchange of money, that was it. So it's about having this patience, but another part to it too is also having female police officers who can actually interact with potential victims of trafficking, because many times women, and children who have been abused by men will not trust another man sitting in a uniform across from them, who sometimes police officers also participate in this because this has been normalized. These women, this is what they do, and it's a job, and it never is. So this is where that sensitivity, that patience and understanding of the impact of trauma on victims of trafficking. And as Regina said, they may not be able to come up with a story as we would like it. At this hour, this is what happened. On this month, this is what happened. Oftentimes they don't even know where they are, what day it is, or anything of the sort. Many of them could say, maybe I was in this country or that. They're not provided with any of this information. So it's very, very hard for them to have the complete facts that law enforcement would like to have, to provide the evidence that is needed, the statements that are needed in a coherent way. So there's been a process of understanding the impact of trauma and the impact of trafficking specifically on women and girls. And it's important that all stakeholders who work with women and girls, especially those that have experienced sex trafficking, understand the psychology behind this and the health impacts as well. So one of the things that the NRM handbook also has as an innovation is a whole chapter on issues related to health and health impacts on victims and survivors of trafficking that should be considered, and a victim-centered way to ensure that all interactions with a potential victim of trafficking or confirmed victim of trafficking actually are not re-damaging and re-traumatizing, and actually will have the conclusion of justice and healing and social inclusion. So thank you very much.
Tatiana, Regina, thank you very, very much for this really very powerful input. And I just want to say, I mean, the majority of those who have been listening to you are members of law enforcement agencies in Europe or other parts of the world. And I think that they are really facilitators who will just carry on what you said and tell their colleagues about it. So I think there is not much to add. And I just can see in the chat that people are really overwhelmed by your contribution. So I can only say thank you. Tatiana, thank you for the work you are doing. And thank you, Regina, for sharing that with us. And I think you will be one who will support the work that Tatiana is doing in the future. Yeah, thank you to all who listened to us today. And we will come back to you with the outcome of the workshop. And I hope we can continue to support the work, the mission to improve the situation of girls, women and girls who are vulnerable across this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. And I just wanted to throw two things out there: that the International Survivors of Trafficking Advisory Council is available to support, train, and ensure a victim and survivor-centered approach. So if there's interest in this, please do feel free to reach out. This is why they're here. And the second, and just one last comment, is that working actually, and I very actively work on looking at the vulnerability of women and children fleeing from the conflict in Ukraine. And there's a massive issue with regards to trafficking, because the demand for women and girls from Ukraine, especially for purposes of exploitation, has exploded. So this is something that all law enforcement should really pay attention to, and through the lens that Regina just actually mentioned. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. And yeah, I hope we will see again this way or the other. Karen, is there anything you want to add? She doesn't hear me. Karen?
Yes, I'm just trying to share my camera, but it doesn't want to. But I just want to thank everybody that's taken part in this workshop this morning. I do feel a little overwhelmed by the, not just the caliber, but the depth of the presentations that we've had. It's been almost quite a humbling experience, but also very heartwarming to know that this work is going on across the world, and following on from Monday as well. So we will be picking up the themes from the various presentations in our conference next month, details of which we're putting out. If people want to join in online, they're very welcome. But I really just want to say a heartfelt thank you for everybody that's taken part in the last two workshops. And Regina, thank you so much for sharing your experience. That can't have been easy, but yeah, absolutely superb. So thank you all ever so much. Thank you. I should add, I suppose, with that, we'll finish the workshop there, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you.